Right, I want to talk about the campaign that is started to look at the debt that Zimbabwe has to its foreign debt. We are not talking about domestic debt. There is also that. We should not take our eyes off the ball. The current estimate is that Zimbabwe owes about $7 billion to foreign governments, to institutions, through IMF and other bodies. 7 billion is a lot of money, especially for a country like Zimbabwe that is struggling at the moment to deliver public services. And the Minister of Finance running what we call a cash budget. In other words, even civil servants might go on strike in a few days' time because there's not enough money available to pay. And every Zimbabwean that you talk to will tell you that Zimbabwe is a very rich country. If we manage our resources properly, we can live and even pay off our debt, or be in a position where we don't have to borrow at all. Now, how did Zimbabwe accrue the 7 billion is information that you are going to find, but this is just part of the information. There is something that is called access to information. It is not possible to get access to all the information that is available about the loan contract that Zimbabwe has had ever since records were put in place. But you will find that this book that has been prepared by the Jubilee Debt Campaign has got a lot of information about where that 7 billion is coming from. Who is owed how much? What is not there are the conditions or the details of the contracts. And there are other things that people are looking at, like unfair contracts. There are institutions that borrowed money to Zimbabwe when it was very clear that Zimbabwe would not be in a position to pay. There are conditions that were attached to some of these loans. Like you would get a foreign government saying, okay, we can offer you money to buy cars to use for your civil servants, but you can only buy those cars from us. So we are going to give you cars anyway. And we are going to supply spare parts which you have to buy from us. So in the end, all Zimbabwe gets are a couple of Omasantan, and all the money stays where it was. Because when you look at the report that Tim Jones has done, you'll find that Zimbabwe is in actual fact paid more than it has borrowed. There is information that Zimbabwe might have paid something like $11 billion since 1980. But you are still owing 7 billion after having paid more than what you owed. So what it means is someone either in the Zimbabwe government who was negotiating these contracts and the conditions for these loans did not do a good job, or they were left with no choice.
Benefited.
But why are we talking about the debt that Zimbabwe has? I believe that those members of Generation X, like Mr. Ndivali here, they will need to take over that debt. Whoever is running whatever government that is going to come will need to address the issues of this 7 billion debt. Are you then going to use whatever is coming from the GDP to service the debt? Are you going to allow Zimbabwe to default and be in breach of these commercial contracts that were signed? Or should Zimbabwe engage into a discussion of finding out what the money was used for in the first place and who should pay, or indeed if Zimbabwe should pay. There is a case that is being raised now that probably Zimbabwe needs to ask that the debt, this 7 billion debt to Zimbabwe must just be cancelled. But then that means addressing those issues with every foreign government, with every institution or individuals that are owed that money. And they will make the decision. There's a school of thought that there are some people who might have benefited somehow from what Zimbabwe has in wealth. And if you look at some of the methods that they have used, they are not as ethical as we would want as Zimbabweans. So can those people, I think that is the example that was done in Morocco, because when the government in Morocco changed, they went around and said, you were corrupt. You took our money as a nation. Unless you use that money and invest that money into schools and hospitals and all those things, we will take you to court. And we will recover our money. And Morocco appears to have solved their problem. So there are many models that can be considered. But these models can only be considered when Zimbabweans are looking at these things together. When Zimbabweans are looking at these things collectively in the interest of Zimbabwe. So that when you approach the Spanish government and say, right, Ian Smith owed 7 billion or 700 million to you, part of that money might have been used to resource the Rhodesian forces. But then as Zimbabweans, it is an issue we have to talk about and say, what do we do? It is our responsibility. It will be the responsibility of the Generation X. So what do you do with that debt? Do you negotiate with the foreign governments? Or you pay it? If you're going to pay it, how is it going to impact on your delivery for public services and other things that are expected in government? We've got Air Zimbabwe. People fail to go for Christmas because Air Zimbabwe could not pay, I don't know, 1.3 million or 2.3 million or whatever it is. Now, if the IMF are saying we want our money and you've got Air Zimbabwe to run, what do you do? This is not an issue that can be left to a selected or elected few. It is an issue that Zimbabweans need to talk about. And we need clarity. Who is owed this money? Because we've got human rights issues here. There are others who are arguing that every time Zimbabwe has gone to borrow money, the next thing that followed were human rights abuses. There are people who are saying Zimbabwe went to borrow money in 1981. And then the next thing, there was Gukurahundi. Where was that money coming from? That money could be part of the 7 billion. So the victims of Gukurahundi now within Generation X will be expected to pay for something that will have resourced the human rights on them. So, or it might well be that no money at all has ever been used into sponsoring or perpetrating violence against Zimbabweans. We don't know. So there are people who are asking for a thorough audit of what Zimbabwe owes and what has happened to that money. It might well be that money has gone into education. It might well be we planted trees. It might well be we did things with that money that no one knows. But let it be clear to all Zimbabweans what has happened, what is owed, and then Zimbabweans can collectively then decide and make recommendations. What do you do about the $7 billion debt? Because if you don't pay that money, or if you don't service that debt, you are not going to be released from the suspension of getting lines of credit from IMF and the World Bank and others. Because at the moment, Zimbabwe cannot get those lines of credit because you are defaulting as a nation. So on the 14th, is it 11th of February? on some day in February. Might be the 11th of February, it is a Friday. The guy that compiled this report on the debt in Zimbabwe, together with other people who have handled their own debt in their own countries, is the 13th?
It's the 11th.
Or the 11th of February. There's a meeting in London. And all Zimbabweans here are invited to go and make a contribution and begin to discuss in earnest. What do we do with the debt that Zimbabwe is owed? As Generation X, we cannot just afford to forget and say, it's none of our business. It's going to be our business at some point. Some people might die before it's paid. And they leave these things in your hands. So it does not, a stitch in time saves none. As a nation, let us decide. If we are not paying, let's agree we are not paying and be clear what the reasons are. If someone has to pay in Zimbabwe, let's be clear why and who it is. We need to find out what was used for that. I mean, with the loans that 7 billion is a lot of money.
Yes.
And that is in addition to the 11 billion that has already been paid. Yeah? So that is the challenge we have. I can't talk about the domestic debt, because the domestic debt has it that Zimbabwe was surviving somehow during all this time of crisis, but borrowing money from the Reserve Bank. So the Reserve Bank is owed money, but the Reserve Bank is the lender of last resort in Zimbabwe. So that is why Zimbabwe is now running a cash budget. Because as a nation, even domestically, it becomes challenging to borrow any money. And Mr. Ndibale was writing yesterday and saying, schools need money. But where is that money going to come from? You need to employ 13,000, at least 13,000 temporary teachers in Zimbabwe. The teachers want money, they are going on strike on Thursday. But where is that money going to come from? But these are things that we cannot leave for other people to decide, because we will continue to have a crisis that will prolong. We need as Zimbabweans to discuss these things and come up with our solutions and say, here is our position, and advocate and push for the condition that we want.